If you've never used Wayback Machine, I haven't used it a lot, but here you go. So this is like an internet recorder. So this is this timeline. You can go back where, however far back they have it. So this is all the way back to January 23rd, 2012. So what he's got it set at is May 23rd, 2020, which is perfect. 2 days prior to the George Floyd incident. This is the use of force policy on the Minneapolis Police Department website. So you can see use of force is 5-300. And if you remember, 5-316 was MRT. So we've got to go through a little bit. Policy, state requirements, use of force definitions. We're going through all this stuff. And you can, of course, go to all of this stuff yourself. It's all online. I'm not going anywhere special here. This is all Google, the fall of Minneapolis. Click on the research tab. You can find all of this stuff yourself. So this is, here you go. Use of force, reporting, post-incident is 5-306, supervisor review, firearm stuff, which doesn't pertain to this. Here's neck restraints that did come up. They talked about neck restraints a little bit in testimony, but not in the fall of Minneapolis at all. They were strictly talking about MRT. So neck restraints is 5-311. Civil disturbance, chemical agents like pepper spray and that kind of stuff. We're getting close. Conductive energy devices like a taser, for example, is 14. Use of impact weapons, so like a baton for strikes, that's 5-315, and here we go, 5-316, the Maximal Restraint Technique. Okay, so again, this is the Wayback Machine recording May 23rd, 2020 of the policy that was online 2 days prior to the George Floyd incident. Now here you go. The purpose of this policy is to establish a policy on the use of hobble, quote, in quotes, hobble restraint devices and the method of transporting prisoners who have been handcuffed with a hobble restraint applied. So here it is right here. Again, they lay it out in the research like here it is. It's right here. I feel like they don't expect people to actually go in and dig deep because this takes a lot of time. I've been working on this hours, many hours. I've been looking at all this stuff. So I get it. They put together a documentary. They put together research. Here's our research. Looks great. You can dive deep into it. If you want to, it's right here. And nobody does because nobody wants to. And here you go. Hobble restraint device. The device limits the motion of a person by tethering both legs together. The approved one is a brand called RIP, R-I-P-P. RIP Hobble is the only authorized brand to be used. Maximal restraint technique used to secure a subject's feet to their waist in order to prevent the movement of legs and limit the possibility of property damage or injury to him or herself or others. Okay, prone position. The purpose of this policy, the term prone position means lay a restrained subject face down on their chest. Side recovery position. Place a restrained subject on their side in order to reduce pressure on his or her chest and facilitate breathing. Rules and regulations. Here's exactly how to lay it out. Again, we've talked about it a number of times, but maximal restraint technique shall only be used in situations where handcuffed subjects are combative and still pose a threat to themselves, officers, or others, or could cause significant damage to property if not properly restrained. So, 2. Using the hobble restraint device, the MRT is accomplished in the following manner. First, A of this portion, a hobble restraint device is placed around the subject's waist. Okay? The next is a second hobble restraint device is placed around the subject's feet. The third step is connect the hobble restraint device around the feet to the hobble restraint device around the waist in front of the subject. The next item here is do not tie the feet of the subject directly to their hands behind their back. This is also known as a hog tie. A supervisor shall be called to the scene when a subject has been restrained using the MRT to evaluate the manner in which the MRT was applied and to evaluate the method of transport. So here you go. Here's another issue, right? A supervisor should have been called to the scene to look at the maximum restraint technique and how it was used. Okay? They didn't do that. And again, I feel like Dr. Chaix would say, well, they were using the MRT, but they weren't fully, some sort of loophole, right? There's got to be some way of talking your way out of this. They were doing MRT, but they didn't use the hobble, was one of his statements. It's like, that's not MRT then if they're not using the hobble. They also didn't call for a supervisor, from my understanding, to come and look at it. If a supervisor had shown up there, they would have said, get off him, right? So here's the whole, as soon as reasonable possible, a person restrained using MRT who is in the prone position shall be placed in the following positions based on the type of restraint used. So here is another thing that Dr. Chaix really harps on. He tries to confuse people, and I think he does confuse a lot of people, lay people who don't work in law enforcement, don't deal with policies like this, don't receive training on policies like this. So A is if the hobble restraint device is used, the person shall be placed in the side recovery position. Okay? And then there's no option B. So he goes on and on about, well, it doesn't say what to do if you don't use the hobble device. And again, I can't say it enough. That is the only device that is authorized to be used is the hobble device. Now, what they did was they were lazy. Whoever edited this is back in 2014, whoever edited this did not change this. It just should say, as soon as reasonable possible, a person restrained using MRT who is in the prone position shall be placed in the side recovery position. There shouldn't be this, because what Dr. Chaix says is that there's a huge failure of this policy. Is it doesn't tell you what to do if you do MRT, but you don't use the hobble. So this is like a little loophole he found in here, he thought. And the problem with that is, let me pull up the old version of the policy and why it says it this way. So there used to be a second thing that was authorized. It was called a wrap restraint. So here's how the wording used to be: as soon as reasonably possible, any person restrained using the MRT who is in the prone position shall be placed in the following positions based on the type of restraint used. A, if the hobble restraint device is used, the person shall be placed in the side recovery position. B, if the wrap restraint is used, the person shall be placed in the side recovery or upright seated position. Okay, now let's stop right there. This is huge, right? If the wrap restraint is used, the person shall be placed in the side recovery position or upright seated position, which I've talked about a lot already on this. Okay, so there you go. If you use this other restraint, you would have had to place them in the side recovery position also, or a seated position. There's no option that's not the side recovery position, and there's also no option for not using some sort of restraint device, hobble, when performing the MRT. So there you go. But Yes, I get that it's mildly confusing here. Again, to a layperson, to somebody who hasn't been exposed to this policy, hasn't been trained on this. When you go through training, you're trained MRT, the Maximal Restraint Technique. When you are trained on this, they will train all of that. Put the person in the side recovery position. They don't just hand you this policy and say, now go out without any training, without talking to anybody or discussing this with anybody, or talking to a use of force instructor or anything like that. They don't do that. They don't just hand you a policy and say, now, okay, based on what's written on here, go perform your job. That's not how this works. That's not how law enforcement works. So Dr. Chaix, his claim that this policy failed Derek Chauvin and the other officers who were there that day, that doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold water. It's ridiculous. He says it a lot, has said it a lot, numerous times. Go watch all the different podcasts he's been on and all the interviews he's done, and he says this repeatedly, and it's such a crazy statement. He just says it with such conviction that this policy failed them, and he's just wrong. So there you go. It's all right there. It's all on the research page. You can click in. You can get right to there. It's not hidden. I would call it hidden in plain sight, right? It's all compiled there, but it's a massive job to go through all this stuff. And it's easier for somebody to just watch an hour documentary and believe everything that was in there. And so that's how they get you. They hey, it's all public. This is all public information. You can go do the research yourself. It's right here, but nobody's going to do it. Maybe they'll go to that research page and click through and scroll through a little bit, but hardly anybody is going to dive deep, and nobody. I didn't find that old version that showed that other option, which is why the policy had been changed and was, mildly confusing. I didn't find that. Somebody else doing some research on this found that. So that was hidden deep, not purposefully, I don't think. It was just they changed the policy, not thinking that it was confusing, and it's a little bit confusing. So there you go. That is what I wanted to add in here.